Well, it's always a delight to have John Mittendorf in the house because he's interesting to talk to.
You never know what's going to happen.
John works with Answers in Genesis, and he does all kinds of series with it. He's kind of our in-house apologist, creation apologist. He's got a new DVD we're going to give out a little bit later on during the program called Heaven and Earth. What's this one about, John?
That one is about the universe, the grandeur of the universe and the earth. And that is straight out of the Answers in Genesis Museum in Kentucky. And what they do is they make about 7, 8, 9 videos special for the museum that just go through and just show the grandeur of creation. And this DVD is one of those.
Okay.
It's excellent.
Be listening towards the end of the program. We're going to get that away. All right, before we get into this, we had a question come today because we were doing texts today.
Okay.
And here's the question. Well, let me ask you one question before I ask you the other. Is it true that the moon is getting further away from the Earth?
2 inches a year.
2 inches a year.
Mm-hmm.
Then why is
Now let me stop you right in the middle of the question to formulate what I'm going to say when you ask me the question.
All right.
If the moon is, and what we've been talking about our last time together last month and then this time, which is the rocks do not lie, we're basically talking about the age, and people say, well, the universe and the Earth look old. But then a lot of creationists will say, well, no, the universe and the Earth are only 6,000 to 10,000 years old. So when you say that it looks old, what do you gauge that with? I mean, what do you look at that you say, oh yeah, this looks just like it's 5 billion years old, let's say, for an example. So what we've been talking about is the fact that when you start looking at the scientific evidence around us, which we're going to talk a little bit about this morning, that no, science says no, things aren't as old as people might think they are. In fact, they're thousands of years old instead of millions of years old. So when you say that the moon recedes from the Earth 2 inches a year, what that means is about 380,000 years ago, or let's say 1 million years ago, we'd have had a significant tide problem on the Earth, if that was true.
All right.
If that was true. It's not true, but if it was true, the moon would have been a lot closer to the Earth, which would have created significant problems.
Well, here's the question.
Yes, sir.
The moon being a big mass,
yes,
why is it going away from the Earth? Why isn't the Earth's gravitation pulling it towards the Earth?
Because you have the orbit of the moon, which tends to throw it outwards.
So the moon's spinning one way and the Earth the other?
No, you have things in the universe are spinning. They're rotational. So as the Earth spins, the Earth rotates around the sun. The moon is also, so as the moon rotates, the Earth rotates, it tends to throw them outwards. We're in what they call a spiral galaxy. Spiral galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, when you say it's a spiral galaxy, you have the core, then you have these spiral arms that come off that, which means it's rotating. Everything is rotating, which tends to spin everything outwards.
Okay. There you go.
I have no idea what I'm talking about, but that just sounds pretty good to me.
You fooled me. But I just want to say to the person who texted that in, there's John Mittendorf's answer. All right.
That's the best I've got. By the way, can we stop just for a second?
Makes sense.
Is it too early for me to wish you and the listeners to the Dove a Merry Christmas?
No, it's not.
And by the way, we have a special guest listening this morning.
Who?
My sister.
Really?
And my sister lives in California, and for her birthday, she got one of those Apple iPad thingies.
Oh.
So what she does, is that what that is? So what she does is she fires that thing up in the morning, turns on the Dove, and has breakfast with the Dove.
Does she watch it on TV? She can watch it.
Exactly right.
All right,
exactly right.
And her name is?
Linda.
Hi, Linda. Welcome to the program down there in California. All right, let's get into it. Rocks don't lie. Where did we leave off and go here?
Well, you know, we covered several things. Let me go back just real quick. Last month we talked about diamonds and coal. And we talked about diamonds and coal are supposed to be millions and billions of years old, and how there shouldn't be any carbon-14 in them, but there's lots of carbon-14 in them. Carbon-14 only has a life of about 60,000 years. Well, we shouldn't find any in diamonds and coal then, right?
Yeah, no, if it's millions and billions.
But we do, right. Yeah. The Earth's magnetic field, we know that it's consistently decreasing, and they've been measuring it for about 100 years, and at that rate, it's decreasing that we know. That the Earth is likely not over 6,000 years old based on the present magnetic field.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. We talked about helium. We talked about the moon recession, 2 inches away a year. But I think the favorite thing that we talked about last month was the DNA that they found in dinosaur
Yeah,
bones. That is a fascinating
I got a lot of
subject.
comments on that.
Did you?
Yeah, people say, well, how could you possibly find plasma in something that old?
65 billion years. Dinosaurs supposedly died out 65 billion years ago. And Dr. Mary Schweitzer, and she has found several now, well, I should say multiple, that now that they know that that's a possibility, that they will take a bone and break it to see what's inside, and they're finding hemoglobin, fresh, muscle tissue that when it's stretched, it will snap back into place. Well, that cannot be 65 billion years old. So what does science do about that?
Right.
You take the proverbial carpet or blanket, sweep it underneath, and let it go back down.
Yeah.
But last night I was thinking about something else that kind of floats along with that, and this is called living fossils. And the coelacanth fish and the woolemi pine supposedly were alive back when dinosaurs were alive, 65 million years ago. Well, when dinosaurs died out, Jurassic period, supposedly the coelacanth fish and the woolemi pines, if you look at a picture of a dinosaur in books, you'll see a pine tree in there. It looks similar today, but they're a little different looking. And supposedly they've been gone for 65 million years. And then in 1948 off the coast of Australia, what do you think they found? A coelacanth fish. And then they found lots of them since then. Now, if you take a fossil of a coelacanth fish, supposedly 65 million years old, and you look at a coelacanth fish today, 65 million years later, what do you think the differences are? Answer, absolutely none. So evidently evolution didn't work on a coelacanth fish for 65 million years. And the same with the woolemi pine. In fact, they thought the woolemi pines were extinct for 65 million years, and then they found a grove of them growing in the outback in Australia. And they're now shipping the woolemi pines from Australia to the zoo in London so they can show people what trees were alive back in the Jurassic time frame 65 million years ago. So when you look at the fossil record of a woolemi pine 65 million years ago and a woolemi pine today, what do you think the differences are?
Yeah, okay. Zero.
Absolutely zero. Yeah. So
how do they, when they get evidence like that, how come they still call it 65 million years then?
Well, they do because that would destroy their paradigm of their old age theories and the Jurassic time frame and dinosaurs died out and all of that.
Evolution in period.
Yeah. And something I thought I would bring up just real quick this morning. Next month, when we're on, I'm thinking about going back and revisiting, we talk about age, revisiting the giant pyramid of Khufu in Egypt.
Well, they found some things in there. They did some drilling, didn't they?
It's called the Gattenbrink door.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on that this morning, but basically the Gattenbrink door is Dr. Zawi Hawass, who's in charge of the Egyptian antiquities, finally allowed them back into the pyramid to do some investigation and drilling and photographic work and what have you. And what they found in one of the little teeny tunnels that goes up through the pyramid is a door that has 2 copper anodes in it.
Okay, leave it at there. Leave it right there.
I'll leave it. If people want to go on the internet and just bring up Gattenbrink's door, Giant Pyramid, Khufu, it'll come up. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
And no, they didn't bury pharaohs in the pyramids.
No.
Okay.
But maybe they figured out a way to reverse gravity.
That's a possibility.
Yeah, okay.
A very good possibility.
All right, now
So-
I just want to make one little correction. Your first statement, I know you were just a little bit of a excitement there, but it's not 65 billion years on the dinosaurs, 65 million.
Yes, 65 million years ago, yeah.
I just want to clarify that because I don't want to get unnecessary emails.
Well, the B's and the M's, you know, I have trouble with those.
Well,
so.
anything over big numbers is
Last month we had a problem with the term uniformitarianism,
right.
which means nothing more than, which goes along with our discussion, that according to secular science, the present is the key to the past and things have been happening at pretty much a constant rate. So if all of that is true, and if that's the way that secular science looks at dating and ages, then we should be able to say, well, wait a minute. If the moon is receding 2 inches per year away from the Earth, then where was it? Millions of years ago. It should have been so close that it would have basically destroyed everything, you see. So basically, the rules are selectively used when it's in your favor,
All right.
is what we're saying, okay? Now let's talk about the shrinking sun paradox.
The shrinking sun. We got the moving away moon.
Yeah, and then we have the sun is rapidly decreasing at 2 feet per year. And I think you can see that because the sun is nothing more than hydrogen.
Per year or per hour?
It's per hour, excuse me.
Okay.
It's per hour. So the sun is basically hydrogen, so it's burning itself out. In fact, science will admit that the universe is going to die a cold death. When the sun burns out, that's it, according to science. So basically what we're saying is that if the sun is decreasing at, oh boy, I forgot
2
again.
feet per hour.
2 feet per hour, where would the sun have been 250,000 years ago?
Well, it's been so hot nobody could have been on here.
That's exactly right. It would have been too hot for life to have evolved on this planet.
Okay.
Interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now what are these boys doing with this info?
They don't, they just ignore it.
Okay.
And 30 million years ago, the sun would have touched the earth. So you can see that from a science perspective, utilizing their criteria, it doesn't add up. And basically, what does it all point to? Creation.
Creation.
Exactly right. Seafloor sediment's another one. The latest geological theories say that the ocean floors are 3 billion years old. That being the case, now when I say sediment, Perry, that means in our rains and floods and what have you, it's going to wash sediment from the continents off into the ocean.
Right.
That being the case, the ocean floors, the sediment at the bottom, should slowly start to build up, and we should see thousands of feet of sediment on the ocean floor. But
You don't.
we don't. You're getting good at this.
Yeah, well, no, I was tracking you.
You're getting very
And that
good.
would have pushed the water up, and that would. So they're now they're saying now that's global warming. So,
Well, yeah, but but back to this one. The sediment that's on the floors, believe it or not, most seafloor sediments point to an age of about 4,300 years old for the Earth when they measure the seafloor sediments.
wow. So they actually can measure from the top of the sediment to the bottom?
Yeah, what they do is they drill down. As they drill down, you've probably seen them, then they pull out these long tubes, and then they can look at the layers of sediment. Same thing with your glaciers. They will drill down through a glacier, and then they can actually look at the layers, and they can actually tell when they've had significant volcanic activity back in time, because you can see the carbon and the ash and stuff in the ice that they pull out in the tube. So it's fascinating. I think also what goes along with that is they also know that there should be, based on the age Earth, there should be a lot more salt in the sea than there really is. That there's not enough salt in the sea to point towards a very old age for the Earth. The salt in the sea points towards a young age, not an old age.
And where does the salt come from?
Well, salt is calcium.
Right. So is the sediment part of that process?
Yes, it's calcium in the rocks and the earth. And of course, when God, this goes back to creation, Perry, that when God made the waters, did he make them salty? And I think that there's evidence for that he did. So the oceans were originally made salty.
Okay.
Because the Bible refers to the great deep, and if you do a word study on great deep, I think you can come up with that fairly easily. Also, you know, when you talk about the sediment in the sea points to an approximate age of the Earth, about 4,300 years old. I think some programs ago I asked you a question. I was, what is the oldest living thing on Earth?
Some would say me, but
no. No, I'm older than you are. It's the bristlecone pine.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
the bristlecone pine tree, which is
time.
right out of Bishop, California. There's also some in southeastern Utah. And endocrinology, which is tree ring dating, which isn't a bad way to date things. They cut the tree, and you look at the end, and you count the rings, which has some merit to it, and that's called endocrinology. And bristlecone pine trees are dated somewhere between 4,000 to 4,500 years old. Why is that important?
Well, it goes back to your 4,300-year-old floor sediment.
Right, which points towards
young Earth.
Young Earth and the flood.
The flood. Oh,
if the flood happened about 4,000 to 4,500 years ago, then the oldest living thing on Earth is the bristlecone pine, which is approximately 4,500 years old.
All right, there you go.
Is that amazing or what?
All right, how old's the Earth? It's not as old as you think it is. And if you're being told and convinced that it may be, we're talking to John Mittendorf about the Earth and the age and some of the evidences that go with it, from dinosaurs to the shrinking sun to the moon shifting away.
Salt in the ocean.
Salt in the ocean, seafloor sediment, which You're saying it's about 1,300 feet deep, which indicates about a 4,300
Well,
year old.
1,300 feet is about the maximum they found. That's not the average. The average sediment on the ocean floor is a lot less than that. But averagely speaking, the average sediment depth on the ocean floor points to an age of somewhere between 4,000 to 4,500 years old for the Earth.
Okay.
And you know what I love about this, Perry? Other than the fact that there's nothing that when I study this stuff that I have to say to myself, oh, I can't use that because that doesn't line up with Genesis.
Yeah.
That in fact that I find that that is consistent on the other side, on the secular science side, and that's why when you ask me these questions sometimes, well, what does science do about that? And I say facetiously, well, they just sweep it under the rug. That's really not so facetious because that's what they really do. They don't talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, they just ignore it and
They
move
just
on.
ignore it, yeah, and that's why I think the subject of oparts, which we'll talk a little bit about next month, out-of-place artifacts, that people will say, there sits the pyramids, there sits Stonehenge, there sits all of these artifacts that display a high level of intelligence, in fact, some of it greater than we have today, because we can't figure out how they did it. And yet we're told that ancient man evolved from apes until finally up to today. Well, wait a minute. If I go back thousands of years in time, and I'm talking about people that were capable of doing things that we can't do today, that points towards the Bible, because God created man in his image, which is intelligent, correct? Not that he was living in a cave and throwing spears at woolly mammoths and slowly evolving into today. So it doesn't line up.
Well, you know, with modern technology being what it is, it's now proving more and more a young Earth. It's certainly proving the book of Genesis, and it's been a huge defense in the whole life issue when a baby is conceived. All this technology is coming out. Sooner or later, the science community is going to have to deal with it head on.
Yeah, and I think what you said is absolutely right, Perry, and that, I think, is a primary reason why, and this was reported in the Wall Street Journal some years ago, and their phraseology was, it's interesting that evolutionists do not like to debate creationists because, and this is their terminology, they normally lose.
They normally lose.
They normally lose, yeah.
All right, let's come back to some of the facts.
Okay.
Deal with comets.
Let's talk about comets. Comets are, and people are probably familiar with comets. You have Halley's and Halley-Bopp comets. And comets are nothing more than dirty snowballs that revolve around the sun, although it's far from the sun, and they revolve in elliptical orbits. So if you have the sun and you have an elliptical, which means there's parts of the orbit that will be further away than other parts, as it's a dirty snowball, as it goes by the sun, it will start to melt. And that's where you get the trail behind a comet. It's melting it. And that being the case, then comets shouldn't have been around, or shouldn't be around for billions of years.
Because the universe, sun would have been closer.
That is, well, no, if the
or
comet...
the sun would have been bigger, excuse me.
Well, it had been bigger, but as the comet goes around the sun, it can only go around so many times before it's going to melt and then be extinct. But we still have comets today, which points towards a young universe.
So they return.
Yes, in elliptical orbit until they finally just
burn out.
Well, melt away.
Yeah.
Melt away. And that's where the trail comes from a comet, is it's melting because it's passed by the sun and you're starting to melt that ice and dirt from the comet. That's all a comet is.
It's a broken off planet, isn't it?
Okay. Star, yeah.
Star. Okay.
Exactly right. Here's another interesting one, artifacts. Coal beds have been dated around 250 million years old, but it's interesting that numerous artifacts have been found in coal. Gold chains, pots, bells, and so on.
Really?
Yes. That is not uncommon. Now, let's stop right there just for a second.
All right.
When I talk about when you study this stuff, one of the things that's fun is you don't have to say, oh, I don't have to talk about that because that doesn't line up. Here's another one that lines up. Why should I find, and let me go back, coal is nothing more than compressed plant matter, is all it is. Okay. And of course the coal beds on Earth are immense. Why would you find artifacts in coal?
Flood?
Bingo. Exactly right. 4,500 years ago, if there was a flood, that basically was a catastrophic event. And basically, when the floodwaters overwhelmed the earth, you would have had, and that's one reason why you have immense fossil beds today, fossils all jumbled up and fossilized. That's why you should also find, or can find, artifacts in coal, because if it's plant matter, compressed plant matter, who knows what you're going to find in compressed plant matter that had to go through a worldwide global flood. And that's exactly what you find.
Wow, fascinating.
Isn't that fascinating?
So the displacement of artifacts has to do with obviously the flood, because they're finding them in places they didn't apparently originate.
Well, you shouldn't find artifacts in compressed plant matter that is solidified into coal unless there was a catastrophic event that have just churned everything up, and then once it was churned up, then compressed it and turned it into coal.
Why aren't we considering, if coal is a compressed plant matter,
Basically.
why aren't we using coal for making fuel instead of burning it? Because isn't gas, oil, compressed, parts of it is compressed plant matter?
Okay. Oil, I'm stepping out on thin ice here according to secular science.
Okay.
The gasoline that we put in our cars today is not a fossil fuel, primarily speaking. It is a plant-based fuel.
Okay.
And you can take today, science has come up with, you can take garbage, and as long as you have the right amount of heat and you have the right amount of compressibility, you can turn it in less than 20 minutes into a higher grade oil that's coming out of Saudi Arabia. Basically, the gas that you're putting in your car is basically a plant, vegetarian-based fuel. Now, there might be some dinosaurs. You know, the common thinking, most people is that when you fill your car up with gas, you're filling it up with decayed dinosaur juice.
Yeah.
And, you know, when I was small, I always used to wonder, how could there have been that many dinosaurs alive to generate countless untold billions and millions of barrels of oil? I mean, think about that for a second. They say, well, there was a lot of dinosaurs alive over 30 billion years. That many? But when you look at it from the perspective of plant-based life that's been compressed, you see, or if you take garbage, just plain garbage today, and compress it and heat it, you will wind up with a higher grade oil than Saudi Arabia. You can see that there's a lot more plants than there was dinosaurs, just as an example.
All right, so if coal is a compressed plant, can that be converted into a fuel?
Yes, but the cost is extremely high to do it.
Okay.
In fact, if you look at the shale oil that's in Colorado,
Right.
the shale, they can extract oil out of that, but it's a very expensive process to do.
Okay.
Actually, if you want to know why we're not turning coal into oil, you might want to ask the present administration.
Yeah, well, I may get an answer I don't want.
That is trying to eliminate the coal industry, by the way, as you know.
Right.
Yeah, through the EPA. Let's talk about stars just for a second. Of all the stars in the universe, blue stars are the most luminous and massive type of star. In other words, they're big and they're very, very bright. Bigger and brighter than other types of stars. And stars are classified by their temperature and brightness. Now, blue stars are the hottest and brightest because they give off the most energy. And blue stars present the biggest challenge to an old universe theory, speaking from astronomy. And it's known that blue stars cannot shine very long and are estimated to only last about a few million years. I think you can see where I'm going with this one. So if blue stars only last a few million years, then why do we have so many blue stars in the universe today? Right? However, blue stars are found throughout the arms of virtually all spiral galaxies, which are postulated to be billion years old. And our galaxy is the Milky Way galaxy, which is a spiral galaxy. Okay?
Wow.
Now, continuing on.
Yeah.
Therefore, if the universe and the galaxies are supposed to be billions of years old, why do we still have so many blue stars in existence? Because they should have burned out a long time ago. But we do. Little problem there.
No problem there.
Little problem.
Is it a blue star that becomes a comet?
No, no, no. A comet is just a piece of ice and dirt. That's all it is. Okay. So you might have a part of it, but when you talk about a star, you're talking about a huge, immense astronomical part of the universe, and of course a comet is very, very small compared to that. So,
okay.
Let's see. How about Earth's continents? This is another good one. Most land is supposed to have been above sea level for hundreds of millions of years. Okay? Each year, water and winds erode about 2.5 billion tons of dirt and rock from the continents and deposit them in the oceans. And that's what we were talking about, the sediment in the seafloors. Okay? At that rate, it would only take about 15 million years to erode all land down to sea level.
Okay.
And of course, that's not what we see today, right?
Right.
So, you know, we keep going on this and talking about this and that and this feat and that and all that kind of stuff. But basically what I'm saying is that when you talk about that the universe and the universe is supposedly supposed to be 15 billion, the Earth is supposed to be 4.5 billion years old.
Right.
Why doesn't the scientific evidence point towards that? And why, in most cases, does it point towards thousands, or in some cases, maybe millions of years? Even millions of years is significantly smaller than billions of years.
Okay.
So basically, when you look at the scientific evidence, it points towards a young universe.
All right, thank you, John. And these notes are available. You can get a hold of us here at theDove. We'll see that you get a copy.
In color, I might add.
All right. And we will give away Heaven and Earth DVD put out by the Creation Museum Collection. And caller number 10 at 776-5368. It's caller number 10. Thank you, John. We'll see you next time.
You bet. Thanks, Perry.
Okay.